so I started to practice loving myself while I felt awful. I would close my eyes and breathe and, see my inner self that is always there no matter what is going on, and love myself through all of those moments. And that was very transformational through my journey also.
Yeah, that is such a key idea. I think many people who are watching this would do well to replay what you just said 3 or 4 times, because that is so important.
Welcome to The Story Behind the Symptoms, a podcast from Symptomatic.me. Your host is David Clark, MD, a board-certified gastroenterologist who successfully diagnosed and treated over 7,000 patients with neuroplastic pain or illness. Each episode, we dive into our guests' life experiences to uncover the deeper causes of their symptoms. By listening to their story, you will gain insights that advance your own journey towards knowledge that becomes healing.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Story Behind the Symptoms podcast. I am your host, Dr. Dave Clark, board-certified internal medicine and gastroenterology and president of the Association for Treatment of Neuroplastic Symptoms. And my guest today is Alisha Braswell, who's going to talk to us about her journey through neuroplastic symptoms. Alisha, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello. Thank you for having me on. I had a chronic illness journey of about 3 years. And now I am fully recovered, and I'm excited to share my story to hopefully help others who may be struggling.
Thank you. And we really appreciate your doing this. I'm sure it's going to be very useful for everybody who watches. Why don't we start the way I start in my office, which is a description of the symptoms. What was happening when they started, and how did they progress from there?
Yes. So I feel like my story starts in 2019 just because that's where kind of stress started. I moved across the country away from a place that I loved to a place that I also love, but it was still hard to move. And pretty soon after that, after finally finding a job and place to live, COVID happened. So that was stressful. And so it was just a multiple stressful life events within a year or two. And then in 2021, I again moved. I lost my job due to COVID. I also went off of birth control for the first time, and getting physical actual periods was very hard for me. And so all of that was a lot at once: moving, losing my job, and getting hard periods. And then I actually moved again about 4 months after all of those changes. And then I got COVID. So that's really what started the chronic illness journey, even though, those factors played a role before getting COVID. And when I got COVID, I was very sick, just with the regular COVID symptoms. And then after I felt like COVID was gone, I experienced heart palpitations, shortness of breath, extreme anxiety. Started with some anxiety, I suppose, and it turned into I started to get panic attacks when I went back to work. I had very hard periods also after getting COVID. And I was really just that started a state of fear. I still was active. I still worked. I worked on a farm. So I was very physically active through all of these sensations happening in my body. And then I ended up getting COVID again in the fall, September of 2022. And then that is what put me on the couch for over a year and a half. And so with those symptoms, that was still extreme anxiety, panic attacks, a lot of heart palpitations, extreme fatigue, very extreme fatigue. I had a lot of stomach issues, constipation, diarrhea, bloating. I even had skin irritations happening, dizziness, hard to stand up, couldn't do any physical activity, and pretty much couch bound from there.
Wow, that was a really severe set of symptoms. And you said it went on for a year and a half.
Yes.
And evidently you pulled yourself out of that. What helped bring that about? What helped begin to get you to recover?
Well, at first, I went to a doctor. Blood work was pretty much fine. Then I went to another doctor, and there was a few things off. And that doctor said that I had long COVID And he also diagnosed me with Lyme's disease. And so that started a confusing battle of, should I be fighting Lyme's or should I be fighting long COVID? And that was very stressful to not know what was happening. I did do, then from there, another practitioner, and I did do detox for, mold, heavy metals, Epstein-Barr, Lyme's, a lot of things. And so through that journey, there was a lot of fear created around kind of all these things attacking my body that I needed to get out. And so I would say that pretty much all of that just created more fear. And so there was that side of it, the actual medical side. And I also, started to look within and ask, why am I sick? And I did journal a lot. I started practicing Reiki, and I did do emotional release things. But the main turning point was when I learned about TMS mind body work. So the difference of, doing this emotional work and having no idea what I was doing. Then once I found TMS mind body work and started to understand the neuroplastic brain and how the brain can create these sensations and that I'm actually safe, the fact that I was actually safe in my body was the main thing that started to heal me. And so when I made that switch and started to learn about TMS mind body work is when I started to heal. And that was a journey within itself.
So what was it about the mind-body work that convinced you that that was something you should pursue? I mean, you had people who were clinicians of one sort or another who were telling you all kinds of other things, that it was mold or that it was Lyme or Epstein-Barr or heavy metals. And why wouldn't you believe them instead of the mind-body? There must have been something about the mind-body approach that resonated for you.
Yes, and that's a good question. I think the first piece was that I was not healing. So, I did believe it all at first. And then when I did so many detoxes and so much battle, I really was not improving. And so that first started to open my mind to, this could be something else. And then I listened to an interview with Dan Buglio, and he spoke about TMS, mind body work. And he talked about people with chronic fatigue syndrome being able to walk 18 minutes, but not being able to walk 19 minutes. And he explained, how that really doesn't make sense physically if you walk 18 minutes and you're safe, but then you walk 19 minutes and you have a huge crash. And so when he said that, that is what made it click at first, because I was really not active, not doing anything, but I did have, certain things where I could walk outside to a garage and feel okay. But then if I walked inside to my third floor, I went into panic mode. And so I started to make those connections of, this kind of can't be physical if I can do this, but not this.
So yes, you were what we call accumulating evidence that this was not consistent with an organ disease or a structural abnormality. It's interesting that you say that it wasn't, when you went to your third floor, you're not talking about fatigue being the issue when you did that, but anxiety being the issue.
Mm-hmm.
How much was anxiety playing a role in the entirety of your illness?
Very strong. I feel like, it was a big piece of the underlying factor of all the other sensations, the fear, and also the actual anxiety, heart palpitations was very debilitating in itself.
So you found the mind-body work. What specifically about it, because I know this would be a big interest to everybody who's watching, what specifically about it helped you begin to recover? And it could obviously be more than one thing.
Well, first was stopping researching. So no more Googling and seeing all of the scary things on the internet. I completely stopped researching symptoms. And that was first a big help. And just the knowing of that it's possible that I'm actually safe, I was actually safe in that moment, started to calm my nervous system. And switching that thought process of if I felt a sensation like a heart palpitation, before I would think, oh my gosh, a mold attacking my heart right now, or all of the other things. Instead, making that switch of, oh, I'm actually safe and this is just a sensation. And with that, I started to do Rebecca Tolan's somatic tracking meditation. And the somatic tracking meditation really helped me because it was calming, and it brought my attention to just my breath at first. And then the fact that I would observe the sensations while I was listening to Rebecca Tolan saying that it's safe to feel them and that nothing is wrong while they're happening really started to allow me to separate from that fear and just allow and accept. And all of that really calmed my nervous system. And, some tools. I also did a lot of guided meditations because that made me feel very calm. And I just started scheduling my day around what made me feel calm and safe and allowing myself to do what I needed to feel calm and safe. And letting go of pressure on myself was also helpful.
Okay, that's a great story. And so how well did it work for you? You'd been in this terrible physical condition for a year and a half, and then you find the mind-body work that you just described. How long did it take to get you back to a reasonable level of health and healing?
It took 1 year to be 100%. And I like to say that once I discovered the mind-body work, though, that's when I actually started to heal. Whereas before it was, a few years of just mostly getting worse, but up and down. And so it was slow for me. And I reintroduced, activities very slow and really allowed myself to let go of the pressure of time, which I feel like letting go of pressure of time and have tos, just letting go of pressure really helped me through my journey. And so I would say it was about 6 months until I was doing things again. And I really reintroduced things slowly and every single week. And so once it was at that year mark, I had 2 lingering kind of sensations that stayed the longest, but I was still, going out into the world again. But then after that year mark, 2 sensations also went away. And also, once I was at that point where I felt, 80, 90% doing most things again, I really just had to pretend like I was totally okay and really just engage in things again. And it just, visualization of being 100% and just believing and then doing really allowed that last little shift.
Remarkable that you were able to do all of this on your own. Were there any other ideas or techniques that you used during that year of recovery besides the ones you've already told us about, the breath work and the meditations and the feeling of safety? I mean, those are all excellent and powerful and fully capable of healing a person, but just out of curiosity, anything else that you used?
Sure. I really listened to Dan Buglio's video on feelings of safety, and he made a video with 24, and I wrote them all down. And anytime I felt confused or anxious, I would go back to that list. And so a part of that list is also engaging in activities that I enjoyed. And so for me, I learned Reiki, and I did a lot of continuing educational classes with that. And it really helped me engage my brain in something that was not my physical health. Even though I know Reiki has to do with health, I really just thought it was interesting. So having a purpose in my day of doing like school online basically really helped to engage my brain in something else. And then engaging in other activities that are fun, like I started to craft. I would listen to a lot of, podcasts while I was crafting to just be engaged in something else and having fun, reintroducing fun and smiling. I really started to make myself smile. I would just smile all the time, secretly, like by myself, and make myself have a huge smile, and honestly helped a lot. It feels awkward at first to have fun, put on music, smile, but all of those things, finding joy really made a big difference.
Yeah, this is something that I emphasize with my own patients, many of whom do not sufficiently put themselves on the list of people they take care of. And as a result of that, they just don't have time, regular time for their own joy. And if you don't have that, it turns out to be an essential human skill to be able to take time for your own joy on a regular basis. And if you don't have it, it's like living on a treadmill that you never step off. And sooner or later, the body is going to protest. Does that resonate for you at all?
Yes, definitely. And it's even a practice now. We need to always remember to have fun. It's interesting how we can forget, but it was a key piece to healing.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to play on up to 3 soccer teams at a time. That was my personal stress reduction. After being kind and compassionate to my patients all week, it was great to just go out there and kick something. And then team would go have a beer afterwards. I mean, it was something I just had to do for my own mental health, and I did it for over 20 years. What was it about Reiki that appealed to you? There are lots of different things that people can study that have to do with the mind and the body. Was there something in particular about Reiki that attracted you?
That's a good question. I heard about it on a podcast, and I think just the way that they explained it really interested me. And I just think it's fascinating. The whole world of quantum physics and energy and how we're all connected really fascinates me. So the energy piece and how we're connected was the main attraction of learning it. And, it did give me a personal tool for healing. I don't like to say that I healed because of Reiki, but it was very calming and soothing when I did self-Reiki. And so that in itself really just gave me my own power back. So I believe that the fact that I felt powerful is how Reiki helped me heal, not just Reiki, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and clearly it's a form of self-care, a form of self-love when you're practicing it on yourself. And that also is an essential human skill to be able to have that.
Yes, I also wanted to say that self-love was a big piece of my healing. I had a long time while I was sick where it was very hard to, have all of my ego crushed and be on the couch and really not love myself for a while. And for a while of the healing journey, being sick, I was waiting to be 100% to love myself again. And I think it must have been through a journal entry. At some point, I had a personal epiphany that I needed to love myself in that moment and now. And so then I started to practice, which I'm also a mind-body coach now. And I tell people that it's a practice and it's always a practice to show yourself love and compassion. And so I started to practice loving myself while I felt awful and while I felt the sensations. I would just, basically I would close my eyes and breathe and, see my inner self that is always there, no matter what is going on, and love myself through all of those moments. And that was very transformational through my journey also.
Yeah, that is such a key idea. I think many people who are watching this would do well to replay what you just said 3 or 4 times, because that is so important. Can you recall at what point in the year and a half that you were so fatigued to be on the couch that you had that epiphany?
I would say after a whole year of being on the couch. And so that does also coincides with when I started to heal.
Yeah, that is absolutely something that can be a turning point. And it's something that I emphasize in my own practice with my patients because a lot of the ideas that you've shared already are connected, that if a person is lacking in self-love, one of the ways to compensate for that is pressure to perform. What you described as the have to imperative, which is for many people who still have that, it's a basis for the symptom imperative, the reason why the symptoms keep coming back on people, either the same symptoms or different symptoms. They just keep occurring because the underlying cause has not been addressed. And the underlying cause is often that pressure to either perform or to take care of other people, or to constantly be productive. And, where does that pressure come from? Well, it's connected to what you've already said, that if you don't have enough love for yourself, one of the ways that people try to earn love from wherever, if it's not coming from inside, they have to get it from somewhere else, other people, from the universe, from somewhere. And one of the ways that they will try to get that is through performing, through accomplishments, through caring for other people, through being perfect. Does this sound like something that you were experiencing yourself?
Oh, yes, 100%. I would say before I got sick, I thrived to be perfect and to do for confirmation from the outside. That is one big reason why I am grateful that I went through the journey, is that lesson of self-love. And, it was hard, of course, and I'm grateful that I started to make that connection while I was sick, and letting go of that pressure was a huge piece of my healing, because it's interesting that you pointed that out for the Reiki. It really was an act of self-love, because I just allowed myself, when I needed to rest. I allowed myself to practice Reiki when I needed it, even if my partner wanted to do something. I let go of all pressures from the outside, all pressures, and gave myself what I needed. And that is a very big act of self-love. And through that, putting up boundaries and learning to take care of myself and love myself while I was not perfect have really transformed me. So I'm grateful for that, and I want to share that message with everyone because it is very important.
Yes, absolutely. And, boundaries are self-love also. No question about that. And usually my patients are not able to set successful boundaries until they have enough love of themselves. You have to feel worthy in yourself to feel like you deserve to set boundaries, because before then, the inclination is not to set boundaries and to do, whatever is required by others in your world, and not to set any limits on that. And as your body told you, you can't do that forever. Sooner or later, the body is going to say, if you're not going to shut this down, I'm going to shut it down.
Yes, I really learned to set boundaries through my journey, and I'm so grateful. I am all about boundaries now. And also with the perfectionist piece, I'm 100% healed now. I love to exercise and run, and I also love to rest, and I allow myself to rest when I need to rest. And I think that is hard for a lot of people, and especially perfectionists. I like to share that I do still rest because I'm a human and we need rest.
Yeah, we absolutely do. Well, I want you to appreciate how remarkable it is what you did for two reasons. One is, if you have a belief about yourself that you are in some way unworthy or not measuring up or not perfect, and then you're on the couch exhausted, that just compounds, obviously, the feeling of unworthiness, which will then compound the fatigue and the other symptoms and just keep spiraling. And I have had patients who have gone down that spiral for many years, 5, 10, 15 years, that they could not pull themselves out of it. So it takes a tremendous act of will to reverse that when the spiral is going down, to say, I'm not doing this anymore. And to do it, it may seem like a long time, that it was, a year and a half before you were able to reverse the spiral, but that's a short period of time. That's much to your credit that you were able to do that so quickly.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was a lot of work, and I'm very grateful for all the information out there on mind-body work and the guidance that I've received from all of the research that is being done on this work. I'm very grateful.
Yeah, I would dearly love to have had access back when I was starting to do this work in the 1980s. Everything that we have available now, 40 years later, it's just, to call it night and day wouldn't be nearly a strong enough analogy. Okay, well, people who've watched other podcasts of mine know that sooner or later I start talking to people about where the lack of self-love, the perfectionism, the drive to perform and achieve came from. And for most of my patients, we can find some experience that they had as children that gave them the message that somehow they were not measuring up, somehow they were not good enough, and in some cases, unfortunately, that they were made to feel completely worthless. And there's a huge range of different ways in which children can be made to feel this way, but it's often where this form of illness begins. Another way to phrase it is that what I look for is assumptions about oneself that were learned as a child that are not true. And I look for that in all of my patients. Can you relate to any of that at all?
Sure. Yes, I definitely can. Starting back at childhood, I would say that it mostly came from my father not giving me praise or attention. I did actually a lot of inner child meditations while I was sick, which was extremely helpful for me. I journaled a lot about your question. And yeah, my father wasn't terrible. He just was distracted and was into his work and was really not a present father. And then through growing up, like middle school age, I did receive his love when I got all A's and was perfect and achieved something. That right there was the enforcement of needing to be perfect.
So it was conditional.
Yes, very much so. Pretty much he was always distracted unless if I did something to achieve his attention.
Okay. And do you recall, even at that age, starting on the have-tos and the perfectionism, or did that come later?
I would say it came pretty early. I feel like when I was a young child, I was very free and happy and loved to just have fun. And that also was a part of one of the meditations that I did. I revisited that child was so happy and loved to have fun. And that was part of my epiphany that I needed to bring her back into my life now. And so I feel like that shifted maybe around 6 or 7. And then
that young.
According to my memory.
Okay. No, that's very young.
Yes.
I mean, it happens with a lot of my patients, but it's still, for a child to start feeling the pressure to perform at age 6 or 7 is a very hard thing. I just want to...
Thank you. Yes, and I think it came out a lot in middle school, then high school. Middle school was also very hard at the school. I had a lot of, I don't know the right word, but in middle school, I lost all of my friends because there was one mean girl who told everyone to not be friends with me anymore. And so I definitely also did a lot of healing, visiting my middle school self. That is when I would say, I was an overachiever. I tried to get A's through school. And I feel like that's also when I started to be controlling over my food. And that lasted through adulthood. And that was also a learning journey through this healing journey.
Yeah, it's controlling of food all the way on up to serious eating disorders are forms of self-care, self-treatment that many of my patients have been through. Probably can best be characterized as a form of control when a person is feeling a state of emotional chaos inside, and that's obviously a very uncomfortable place to be. Controlling what goes into your body, controlling the size and shape of your body are giving you something to hang on to that can, to a certain degree, counteract the emotional chaos. And what I found is that a lot of the same ideas and concepts and approaches that help with neuroplastic symptoms can also be helpful in people with eating disorders. That if we can restore the sense of self, the self-love, remove some of the emotional chaos by helping people understand where it came from, then they don't need the eating disorder as much anymore, just as their minds don't need to unload emotions into their bodies.
Right.
So it's very common to see issues around food accompany a lot of these other issues.
Yes, it was when I was very sick, I had a hard time eating anything, and I had no idea why. And that was a very big challenge through my journey. And what helped me with that is after I ate, I would start to do the somatic tracking meditation right away. And so bringing a lot of calmness and self-love to eating was healing. And also, I let go of a lot of diet things when I got sick. So that was helpful to have that letting go.
Yeah, so many people with these conditions have tried every diet imaginable, and obviously it's not the food. So can you tell me what the feeling was before you began the healing part of your journey? What was the feeling that you had when you ate, when you were so ill and on the couch and you would eat food? It obviously must have done something negative to...
Yes, I really just felt completely awful. Felt in panic mode. And I also just felt like my stomach was not able to digest, and it felt like I was feeding my body poison. It was like I was not supposed to eat. It felt like my body was shutting down every single time that I ate.
That's obviously a very severe symptom. But again, it sounds like that particular symptom responded to all the same treatments you were doing for the fatigue and everything else, that they all improved in parallel with each other. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Pretty much the meditations, calming, somatic tracking, and knowing that I was safe after I ate, and doing that very consistently is what helped that to just slowly start to ease. And that was very challenging. I felt like no one could ever feel that way that I felt. But now I do know that it is I don't know about common, but I have heard of it, happening to some of my clients that have had long COVID, just not being able to eat. So I don't know any physical reason for that. And all I know is that the calming and somatic tracking meditations is what helped it to fade away.
Yeah, it's very common in my patients, and I'm very glad that you shared it, because there are going to be a lot of people who see this that can identify with that. I also wanted to go back to middle school for a moment and just say that people who feel pressure to perform, starting at age 6 or 7, as you did, are going to be particularly vulnerable to bullies, because they are going to be carrying around inside of them the idea that they're not measuring up, they're not good enough. And if there's a bully around, they're going to pick up on that. They're going to recognize, when they're doing their bullying thing to everybody around them, that someone like yourself who has that struggle that you did is going to respond particularly severely to their behavior, to the bully's behavior, because you're just that much more vulnerable to it than other children. And so the bully is going to recognize that vulnerability and take advantage of it. And unfortunately, it sounds like that's what happened to you. Very, very difficult, because it compounds the feeling of unworthiness.
Yes, I had never thought of it the way that you just explained it, but it was definitely very isolating and compounded the unworthy feeling for sure. that felt like that hurt me for a very long time. And I think, even till now, through this healing journey, took to heal it at least as much as I have healed it.
Yeah, well, one of the analogies that I make with my patients to help them reverse some of these false beliefs is to imagine that your early years were analogous to getting parachuted into the Himalayas as a toddler and having to find your way out. And, that you, through no fault of your own, you found yourself in this very difficult, high pressure, potentially dangerous to your mental health environment. And yet you had the courage and the perseverance to find your way out, and that you deserve tremendous credit for having done that. Just as I said earlier about finding a way to give yourself self-love when you were in a spiral going in exactly the opposite direction toward less and less self-love over time. To just say, I'm stopping this, just amazing.
Thank you. That's helpful for you to put it in that way.
Yeah, it's what I see in my patients over and over again. My patients are my heroes. I mean, they have been carrying huge burdens of stress for a long time, and very few people know how much. All right, another area that I like to ask about is close personal relationships. Many of my patients who grew up trying to be perfect and having that pressure to perform and the pressure to meet the needs of others in their immediate environment end up choosing less than ideal people to be in relationships with. They often find themselves with people who have problems or needs or issues that they then set about trying to support or help or deal with. And where they end up is in a relationship that's unbalanced, where they are giving a lot more than they are getting back. Did you have any experience like that? Not everybody does.
I did, yes. Thankfully, it wasn't terribly, one-sided. It wasn't like a crazy unhealthy relationship, but I was with a partner for 7 years, and actually that partner is who I broke up with in the move of 2019. And, I'm very grateful for that relationship, and there was lots of wonderful things. But I read a book called Attached from a counselor, and that book really helped me to see my relationship with that person and how it was not equal, I guess would be the word. And he definitely had some traits like my father of wanting me to be perfect. I completely felt I needed to be perfect for him to love me those whole 7 years. And so there's that. And then the partner that I have now and that I moved in with right before I got sick, I actually moved in and then got COVID 2 weeks after moving in. And so that was even more compounded of being in a new relationship, trying to be perfect, and then getting sick right after I moved in. And so, like I said, for about a year was lots of not self-love and deep, dark night of the soul time. And that the partner that I have now still showed me love when I was not perfect. And that was really hard for me to receive and accept. And also, I think that's, a piece of how I was able to start to love myself. But really, I reached a point of, not knowing if my partner would stay with me if I was sick forever, and having to accept I could have to go live with my mom if I never get better. And then that was the low point where I thought, okay, I can't receive love right now from anyone else. Then I have to do it myself. It was just kind of that low point that made that switch. Like, it's up to me.
Yeah, that's such a remarkable insight. But I'm thinking that at least with a lot of my patients, and you can tell me if this was true of you or not, to be in a relationship with somebody who loves you even when you're flat out on the couch, I mean, that's about as unconditional as it gets. To accept someone like that in your life all the way back in 19, before you became ill, there must have been something about you at that point that thought you deserved somebody like that in your life. And there must have been something about you that felt like you did not deserve the previous partner in your life, that there must have been some kind of shift between the two relationships in how you thought about yourself. Even, it may not have been all that obvious, certainly not as obvious as the epiphany that you had when you were ill, but some kind of mental change that the old partner was not good for you and the new partner was. Can you speak to that at all, or was it like completely subconscious?
Sure. No, I did do self-work in between that time. It was actually 2 years in between about. And so in those 2 years, I did a lot of self-work and journaling and, visiting why I wasn't with the last partner and how to build myself up and who I would want a future partner to be and who I was worthy of receiving next. Did do a lot of self-work before I met the partner that I met now. So I did just move in with this partner in 2021, almost 3 years actually in between those. That's interesting for you to observe.
Okay. All right. Well, as long as I'm doing total speculations here, we might as well try one more. Tell me the time difference between when you became ill and when you moved in with the current partner.
Well, we had only dated for 6 months before I moved in, and then I moved in and got sick. And so, a part of me thinks that I finally had security and then it all came crashing down. I don't know the answer to that, but 6 months and then I moved in and then got sick right away.
Okay. Well, again, I'm really speculating here, even more so than before, but many of my patients have what I call the good partner, bad illness syndrome. And they get sick right after they meet somebody who forms a mutually beneficial relationship with them, which sounds totally crazy and at the very least ironic. But I have seen it happen to countless patients over the years. And why is this happening? Well, there's potentially two reasons, and you're perfectly free to tell me I'm totally off base with respect to yourself on this. Two reasons that I've seen. One is that when you really get together with a loving, mutually supportive person, potentially for the first time, there can be a certain amount of anxiety about whether you deserve that person and whether you are an imposter and whether this person that you're with is going to wake up one day and say, no, you're actually unworthy. I'm out of here. People can get really anxious about that. One of the stories that comes back to me over the years is a patient I was examining on the exam table in my office and checking out her belly to make sure it was okay. And her hands were at her side and she had a pretty impressive engagement ring on her left hand. And I complimented her on it. And she said, oh, yes, my fiance and I got engaged 6 months ago, which happened to be exactly the length of time that she had been ill. And he was, she was in her 30s, and this was the first person in her entire life who had truly cared for her. But she, even after 6 months of being engaged, she was still a little worried that things were not going to work out because she carried that long-standing belief from many years ago that she was unworthy. And then the second reason on top of that anxiety is that once you accept the idea that you actually are worthy of this person and that all of the nice things that he says to you are true, then it's hard to escape the conclusion that what you went through when you were younger was undeserved. And people can develop a degree of resentment over what they went through in the past that is ironically compounded by the very kind treatment they are getting in their current relationship. So I've seen both of those factors come into play, and it doesn't have to be a relationship. It can be anything that's life-affirming in some way. One of my patients became ill after receiving the Employee of the Year award from his company, and his company had 400 employees, so it was quite an honor. And he became ill after that because it was in such contrast to how he had been mistreated as a boy. Another patient, within 6 months, she got her PhD, she got a great job, she got married, and she adopted a child. Great. She told me, I can't possibly have a stress-related illness because my life has never been better. But she had grown up in a home where she was told she would never amount to anything. She was the first person in her family even to attend college, let alone graduate from college, and then get a PhD. So all of these wonderful things that happened to her were in such huge contrast to how she had been made to feel as a girl. And the resentment started to boil up in the form of physical symptoms. So any of that sound like it could have come into play? And if it didn't, that's fine. Not everybody has this.
But yes, that's very interesting, all of your stories. And I think that's completely true. With my situation, this was the first mutually loving partnership that I have ever experienced. So I think that's completely true with what happened to me, definitely.
Okay.
And yes, it was hard to receive his love before I got sick. And then it was hard to receive his love, especially when I was sick.
Yeah, that feeling of unworthiness can be obviously, when you've learned it at a young age, when it becomes an assumption about who you are, it's hard to undo it. But you obviously did. I mean, it's really in the space of time that you were able to do this, it's a remarkable effort that you made and to be successful in such a short time. Very impressive.
Thank you.
I think those are all the questions that I had. You have shared so much that is going to be tremendously valuable for everybody who sees this. And it's definitely people who are still experiencing their symptoms are going to take tremendous hope from how severely afflicted you were and were able to recover from that completely the way you have. Are there any other parts of the story that we haven't covered or that you would like to share, or questions that you have for me before we close?
I feel like I shared the good parts, the main points of my story. I really just want to restate that I was very sick and that I'm totally recovered now, just for the hope that I really feel like anyone can recover. I just think it's totally possible for anyone to do this work. It's transformational and it is work. It's not a overnight pill. It's totally possible to fully heal through this work. And I just want to re-say that.
Yeah, and I greatly appreciate hearing that. So I know you work with clients. If somebody wants to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Sure. I have a website called Vibrant Energy Healing. It's easier if you just Google Alisha Braswell and find my website. And I have an email, and I also have a free discovery call to see, if you just want to chat to see what my services are. And I'm also on Facebook at Vibrant Energy Healing.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted that you're using what you've learned to help others. We need everybody we can to be doing this work.
Yes, of course. It feels like my life mission now, and I really love guiding others through this. And thank you for all the work that you do. I'm so grateful for everyone who does this work, and especially research side and all of that. So thank you.
Thank you.